watching A News. I'm Katie Wilson. Here are the headlines. President Trump says the Putin-Zelensky meeting is going to happen. US, EU and UK leaders are set to meet in Scotland for trade negotiations. Tens of thousands flee their homes as Thailand and Cambodia clash. Efforts to end the war in Ukraine are gaining renewed momentum with high-profile mediation attempts and limited breakthroughs. While a ceasefire remains elusive, this week saw some progress on the humanitarian front.
US President Donald Trump says a long-awaited face-to-face meeting between Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky is going to happen. However, he expressed his regrets it hasn't happened already. Speaking before leaving for Scotland, Trump emphasised that such a summit should have taken place 3 months ago. His remarks come amid heightened diplomatic efforts to end the Russia-Ukraine war. President of Turkey Recep Tayyip Erdogan is now stepping up mediation. He announced plans to bring Trump and Putin together in Istanbul for direct negotiations. Erdogan said Ankara would hold talks with both leaders this week to assess the possibility of hosting the long-anticipated summit. Meanwhile, Russian and Ukrainian delegations met on Wednesday for negotiations in Istanbul's Chiragan Palace. This was their third round of talks after previous sessions happening in May and June. The Ukrainian side proposed a high-level leaders' summit by late August to finalise a peace deal.
The priority number one is to organize a meeting of the leaders of presidents, where participation of President Trump and Erdogan will be most valuable. A real ceasefire and end to all strikes on civilian infrastructure. This can be a crucial first steps towards lasting peace. We proposed to the Russian side to hold such a meeting of leaders until the end of August.
But Russia's delegation dismissed the idea, insisting that a Putin-Zelensky meeting could only occur to formalise an agreement already reached.
For this meeting to happen, we need to work out the deal conditions first and to understand what will be actually discussed at this meeting. Actually, this meeting is not for discussing a deal, but for wrapping it up, signing the final agreement. As the saying goes, the end crowns the work. There is no point in the meeting to discuss all of this all over again.
Still, there was one breakthrough. Both sides agreed on a large-scale prisoner swap. Each side will release 1,200 prisoners of war. Russia also pledged to return the remains of 3,000 fallen Ukrainian soldiers. Ukrainian President Zelensky confirmed that over 1,000 soldiers had returned home, many in poor health after years in captivity. Russia likewise welcomed its freed troops in Belarus, sharing images of emotional reunions. Despite the humanitarian progress, there was no movement toward a ceasefire. The Turkish foreign minister urged both parties to halt what he called a bloody war, but the 40-minute meeting concluded without tangible progress on ending the violence.
The war in Ukraine continues to evolve with shifting front lines and a sharp increase in military engagements. While Russia advances in some areas, Ukrainian forces continue to repel assaults across multiple fronts.
At least 9 civilians were killed and 61 injured in Russian attacks across Ukraine over the past 24 hours. Regional authorities reported on July 26. Russia launched a wave of overnight ballistic missile strikes on Saturday, heavily targeting Ukraine's Kharkiv, Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhzhia regions. The city of Kharkiv endured a particularly intense assault, hit by drones, missiles and guided aerial bombs throughout the night. Meanwhile, fierce battles continue around the eastern city of Pokrovsk, a key logistics hub. President Volodymyr Zelensky said in his latest address that this front is currently the main focus of Ukraine's military efforts.
There was a report on the operational situation, delivered by Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrsky. All operational directions were covered, with particular focus on Pokrovsk. It receives the most attention. In the Sumy region, We continue to act in the border areas. I also want to thank all our units operating on Russian territory.
In the north, Ukrainian troops are also holding their ground in the Sumy region, where Russian forces have recently made incursions. Russia claimed to have seized 5 settlements in the past week. Russian Defense Ministry also reported that air defense downed 5 HIMARS multiple launch rocket systems and 257 fixed-wing unmanned aerial vehicles of the Ukrainian armed forces in 24 hours. Ukraine's General Staff confirmed 85 combat engagements along the front lines over the past day, with the most intense fighting centered on Pokrovsk.
US President Donald Trump says that he wants to maintain nuclear weapons limits with Russia under the new START treaty, marking the first time he has supported keeping the agreement since returning to office.
US President Donald Trump said that he supports keeping nuclear weapons limits with Russia, backing the New START treaty just months ahead of its scheduled expiration. He warned against letting the treaty lapse, saying the removal of nuclear restrictions would be dangerous. His remarks come as the 2010 New START agreement, the only remaining nuclear arms control pact between Washington and Moscow, is due to expire on February 5, 2026. The treaty places strict, verifiable caps on both sides' long-range nuclear arsenals. It limits the United States and Russia to no more than 1,550 deployed strategic nuclear warheads and no more than 700 deployed intercontinental ballistic missiles, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, and heavy bombers designed to carry nuclear weapons. It also includes a ceiling of 800 for deployed and non-deployed missile launchers and bombers. Both countries met these limits by 2018 and have remained under them since. The treaty also includes regular inspections and data exchanges aimed at preventing misunderstandings or escalation. New START was extended once by former President Joe Biden and Russian President Vladimir Putin in 2021. But under its current terms, the agreement cannot be extended again because it allows only one 5-year extension, which was already used in 2021. During his first term, Trump had opposed the extension and pushed for a broader deal that would include China, something Beijing rejected. Earlier this year, he indicated interest in opening talks with both Russia and China on new nuclear limits. Russia has not officially responded to Trump's latest remarks, but the Kremlin has previously warned that without a follow-on agreement, both sides could increase their strategic warhead deployments and lose visibility into each other's nuclear posture. With relations between Washington and Moscow at their lowest point in decades, arms control experts say time is running out to avoid a breakdown in nuclear transparency.
Australia and the UK have forged a historic 50-year agreement to strengthen their defence partnership through the AUKUS nuclear submarine initiative. Known as the Geelong Treaty, the deal ushers in an enhanced maritime defence strategy and the creation of thousands of new jobs.
Australia and the United Kingdom have officially signed a landmark 50-year treaty that will anchor their cooperation on the AUKUS nuclear submarine partnership for decades to come. The signing ceremony took place in Geelong, Australia, marking a major moment in defence relations between the two nations. The agreement, referred to as the Geelong Treaty, demonstrates the strong defence and security cooperation between Australia and the United Kingdom. It is also expected to create tens of thousands of jobs across both countries.
The Geelong Treaty represents one of the most significant treaties between Australia and the United Kingdom that has been signed since Federation. What this treaty will do is underpin the way in which both our countries develop a class of submarine that we will jointly operate.
It is a treaty to build the most advanced, most powerful attack submarines either of our nations have ever had. It is a treaty that will fortify the Indo-Pacific, it will strengthen NATO, and we're the politicians signing it today.
The AUKUS agreement, a trilateral security pact between Australia, the United Kingdom and the United States, was announced in 2021. Its main objective is to enhance overall security and stability in the Indo-Pacific. The project is widely seen as a strategic response to rising tensions and growing Chinese influence. Though the long-term plan is ambitious, it recently came under review after US President Donald Trump ordered a reassessment to ensure it aligns with his America First agenda. Still, key lawmakers from both parties in Congress continue to support the pact. Australia reaffirmed its commitment with a second $525 million payment to the US, while the UK is working to expand its submarine industry to meet AUKUS goals. The signing of the Geelong Treaty signals a firm move forward, even as Washington reviews its position.
At least 9 people were killed on Saturday morning in an armed attack on a judiciary building in Iran's southeastern city of Zahedan. According to Iranian media, the assault, which has been claimed by the militant group Jaish al-Adel, began with gunfire at the courthouse before spilling over to target civilians. Iranian security forces killed 3 of the attackers, and authorities have launched an investigation. Zahedan, which has long been troubled by unrest, lies near Iran's border with Pakistan and Afghanistan. Fighting along the Thai-Cambodian border has killed more than 30 people, injured over 130 others, and forced more than 130,000 to flee their homes as clashes enter a third day.
The worst border fighting between Thailand and Cambodia in 13 years has claimed over 30 lives and displaced more than 130,000 people from their homes. Thailand reports 7 soldiers and 13 civilians killed, while Cambodia confirms 5 soldiers and 8 civilians dead, according to Cambodian Defense Ministry spokesperson Mali Socheata. Despite talks brokered by Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, who said a ceasefire agreement was reached on Thursday night, fighting continued on the ground. Anwar remains committed to pursuing peace between the two countries. US President Donald Trump also said he spoke with the leaders of Cambodia and Thailand, who are ready to agree a ceasefire and return to peace talks. He welcomed their efforts, but warned that trade with the US will only resume once the fighting stops. Trump called the talks an honor and said he looks forward to finalizing trade deals after peace is reached. The UN Security Council held an emergency closed meeting on Friday with representatives from both Thailand and Cambodia. Cambodia's UN ambassador called for an unconditional ceasefire and a peaceful resolution. Thailand also submitted a letter blaming Cambodia for the conflict and called on the international community to demand an immediate halt to fighting and renewed dialogue. Meanwhile, China has denied allegations of supplying military equipment to Cambodia amid the border tensions. The conflict's roots go back to colonial-era borders drawn by French authorities in 1907. At that time, Thailand, then Siam, was pressured by France to sign a treaty that included a map placing the ancient Preah Vihear temple inside Cambodian territory. Cambodia views this map as legally binding and has used it to support its claims. Thailand disputes the map's accuracy and the treaty's validity, saying it was signed under pressure and never fully approved. Tensions rose sharply in 2008 after Cambodia listed the temple as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This triggered strong nationalist backlash in Thailand. That year, Thai soldiers reportedly moved near a disputed pagoda close to the temple. Cambodia claims this land, but Thailand says the border there was never fully marked. The dispute stems from a 1962 International Court of Justice ruling. The court awarded ownership of the temple to Cambodia by a 9-3 vote. Since then, clashes have happened sporadically, causing casualties on both sides. The latest escalation began in May, after a Cambodian soldier was killed during a border skirmish. Both countries have since imposed trade bans, withdrawn ambassadors, and reinforced their military presence.
Now, France will become the first G7 nation to officially recognise a Palestinian state. President Emmanuel Macron said this week the formal announcement would be made at a session of the UN General Assembly in September. Joining us now to discuss this is political scientist Philippe Fernandez. Thank you for being with us. Now, how has the world reacted to this announcement by the French president?
Good evening, Kate. Thank you for having me here. So the world is much divided on this position by Emmanuel Macron. First and foremost, we need to understand that Emmanuel Macron has been trying to have an international position of leadership when trying to be seen and to be perceived as a peacemaker and as a deal maker, despite not being recognized as a very successful one. So the world divides when Emmanuel Macron tries to take a stance so significant nonetheless. And so, for instance, we understand that some European countries, such as Spain and Norway, for instance, and the Republic of Ireland, have recognized a Palestinian state already. So we know that Spain is pushing really hard for this agenda to go forward, pushing really hard for the Palestinian state to be recognized. We know that within the Arab world, there was a lot of support from Jordan and from Saudi Arabia, for instance, in this Emmanuel Macron's decision. And of course, then we have the United States of America. And something very significant that I would like to highlight is Trump's opinion on and Trump's words on France's decision to recognize a Palestinian state, when Trump stated, what Emmanuel Macron says does not really matter, something like this. And so this highlights how the world is divided, but on this decision, but at the same time, how Emmanuel Macron is being discredited internationally. And this is very significant, especially because I think everyone is now getting the sense that maybe Emmanuel Macron is trying to pursue an international career after his French presidency ends. And we know that internally he is not leaving the French presidency in a very good shape to what his perspective means. We know that his political adversaries are most likely to win the 2026 presidential election. And so even though the world is divided between those who are supporting and the ones who are opposing Macron's decision, we understand that the French president does not have the political influence in the international stage as he probably wishes he had.
But France is still a G7 nation, isn't it? So how likely is it that other G7 countries could follow suit?
No, I would say that the most expected outcome is for France to be isolated within the G7. Yes, France is a G7 country, of course. So is the United States. And the United States of America is the most relevant, most powerful, most influential G7 nation. And so, for instance, in Italy, Giorgia Meloni and the Foreign Minister Tajani have stated, for instance, that one, it is rather counterproductive to recognize a Palestinian state while a war is ongoing. And secondly, that the Palestinians needed to recognize Israel as well in order for the international community to recognize Palestine as a state. For instance, in Germany, and Germany has been supporting Israeli efforts for quite a long time now. Of course, the German government does not have any plan for recognizing the Palestinian state on a short term, at the very least. Within the UK, we know that Prime Minister Keir Starmer supports the idea of recognizing a Palestinian state, but understands that he cannot fully commit to that level, at least with an ongoing war. This is also, and even more effusively and more prominently, the position of Canada and Japan. Canada and Japan have basically stated that they will not recognize the Palestinian state with an ongoing war. So it will all depend on the outcome of this war. And the outcome of this war is absolutely crucial to understand to what circumstances and with what conditions can the international community recognize the Palestinian state. As of now, it's really difficult to answer first and foremost, who are the Palestinians? Are we talking about the people who are living in the Gaza Strip, or the people who are living in the Gaza Strip and living on the West Bank, or the ones with historical ties to Syria, Lebanon, or Iraq? And if it's difficult to recognize the people as of now, it's even more difficult to understand where will this state be located as of now with this ongoing war. Are we pushing, and is France, for instance, pushing for a Palestinian state in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank? Or what decision is actually trying to implement? And for last but not at all less important, is who is going to have legitimate political legitimization to rule this Palestinian state. And so it is very difficult, as this war has started against one specific group with one specific target, being Hamas. Is Hamas going to be legitimized as the ruler of the Palestinian state? Or what condition are we going to set? Because we know that, for instance, it's not very clear between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority who would rule with a formal and institutionalized and internationally recognized Palestinian state. So with all these massive questions, I would expect France to be isolated within the G7 group.
All really interesting, isn't it? Thank you so much for your insights and for joining us on the programme. Now, President Trump has arrived in Scotland. He's expected to meet EU President Ursula von der Leyen and UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, with trade negotiations high on the agenda.
US President Donald Trump has arrived in Scotland for a 5-day visit, during which he is set to meet European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen on Sunday. The visit follows Trump's recent threat to impose 30% tariffs on the EU if a trade deal is not reached by August 1st. Von der Leyen confirmed the meeting in a social media post.
Following a good call with the President of the United States, we have agreed to meet in Scotland on Sunday to discuss transatlantic trade relations and how we can keep them strong.
Trump said a trade deal with the EU would be significant, adding that the chances of reaching an agreement are evenly balanced.
I'll be meeting with the EU on Sunday, and we'll be working on a deal. We'll see if we make a deal. Ursula will be here, highly respected woman, so we look forward to that. That'll be good. With the European Union, I think we have a good 50-50 chance. That's a lot.
The White House also confirmed Trump will meet UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer during his stay. Earlier this week, the European Commission briefed member states on the status of trade negotiations and the potential of using anti-coercion tools in response to US tariffs. Member states approved a list of retaliatory tariffs worth €93 billion on US imports, with only Hungary voting against. The EU and the United States remain each other's largest trading partners across goods, services and investment.
Europe's leading car makers face plunging profits as tariffs and global competition weigh heavily on the sector. A News' Anita Sharma has more on the challenges shaping the future of Europe's auto industry.
Hello everyone, welcome to This Day in Europe. Germany's automotive giant Volkswagen sees a seismic drop in first half performance. Operating profit for the second quarter plunged 29% to €3.8 billion. That prompted the company to cut its top-end annual profit margin guidance by 1.5% to 5%. Volkswagen cited tariffs, high restructuring costs, and a shift to lower margin electric vehicles as major contributors to its weakening results. Volkswagen took a €1.3 billion tariff hit due to sweeping U.S. import duties. To resolve this, CEO Oliver Blume is considering major investments in U.S.-based production, particularly for Audi and Porsche, to reduce exposure to American tariffs. Market analysts see the results as a canary in the coal mine for European automakers. Some investors welcome a potential 15% U.S.-EU tariff deal, noting that auto stocks surged after Japan secured such terms with Washington. Now, the EU still sees a trade deal, quote, within reach with the United States and is scrambling to finalize the 15% deal modeled after Japan's arrangement to avoid harsher 30% rates set to begin August 1st. But analysts remain cautious about the auto sector, citing a host of structural challenges, a strong euro, sluggish EV adoption, and surging Chinese competition from brands like BYD that continue to pressure auto profits across the board. And Volkswagen certainly isn't alone here. Stellantis, the company behind Jeep, Peugeot, and Fiat, recently reported a preliminary net loss of 2.3 billion euros in the first half due to 300 million euros in tariff-related charges, suspended production, and costly restructuring efforts, despite shipping 1.45 million vehicles, including Rams. The company is also dealing with recalls in a large number of cars. Volvo Motor Group and others are in a tight spot as well. Volvo CEO called the U.S. tariffs, quote, absolutely unnecessary, and warned of collapsing margins unless trade policy shifts before August. EU automakers are lobbying Brussels to negotiate immediate relief using promised U.S. investments as leverage. European trade officials are exploring options such as import mechanisms that essentially reduce tariffs on EU-made cars exported from U.S. plants, benefiting firms like BMW and Mercedes-Benz that already manufacture in the States. At last check, Volkswagen stock moved higher today in Frankfurt. The company plans to slash up to 35,000 jobs by 2030 and double down on EVs, where margins remain challenging. As for Stellantis, shares are higher in Milan, but down about 33% year to date. Investors are waiting for the July 29th report to see how the company rearranges operations in these very precarious times. Overall, the broader auto sector is sending a clear message. Tariffs are not just cost, they mandate strategy shifts. Whether Europe can strike a fair deal is really crucial here. A 15% tariff compromise could ease immediate pressure, but companies warned that without structural adjustments, profits will continue to contract. As the U.S. deadline nears, investors and policymakers want to see if European automakers can rebound on policy promise or buckle under the global cost of protectionism. From Arnhem, Netherlands, I'm Anita Sharma for A News.
Now to Turkey, where renewed talks with the EU have raised hopes of reviving long-stalled membership negotiations. Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan met with EU Enlargement Commissioner Marta Kos in Istanbul. Our Turkey correspondent Aliya Aziz brings us the latest developments.
Turkey and the EU have restarted meaningful dialogue after years of decline. In late June, Turkish and EU officials exchanged views at regional meetings, laying the groundwork for more cooperation in July, especially on customs union updates, visa liberalization, and migration policy. While cautious diplomats on both sides described the tone as more open than in previous years. This renewed push comes as Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan delivered a strong message this week, urging Brussels to resume Turkey's EU accession talks without delay. He warned this could be the EU's final opportunity to rebuild trust and stressed Turkey's commitment to full membership. Pointing to Turkey's critical role in energy, defense, and regional diplomacy, Erdogan said Europe needs Turkey as a strategic partner now more than ever. With that message being said, on Friday, Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan met with EU Enlargement Commissioner Marta Kos in Istanbul, marking her first visit to Turkey since taking office in December 2024. According to diplomatic sources, Fidan emphasized that EU membership remains Turkey's strategic goal, but called for a fair approach from the EU. Previously, he welcomed improvements to Schengen visa rules, but stressed they must apply equally to all Turkish citizens. Crucially, he called for Turkey to be included in all meetings held with other candidate countries, underscoring the need for an unbiased and rational enlargement policy from Brussels. The EU maintains that Turkey must meet all membership criteria, including democratic reforms, the rule of law, and human rights standards. Discussions have progressed over the years, with some areas of cooperation continuing despite ongoing challenges. With high-level meetings underway and both sides signaling a desire to move forward, the next few weeks may determine whether Turkey and the EU can finally reset a relationship long defined by stalled ambitions. For A News, this is Aliya Aziz, Istanbul, Turkey.
Azerbaijan is urging Russia to take full responsibility for the downing of an Azerbaijan Airlines aircraft in Russian territory in December last year. Azetaj reports that Presidential aide Hikmet Hacıyev said to the Berliner Zeitung that the incident has caused deep public shock and strained bilateral ties. He emphasised that while misunderstandings between neighbours can happen, Azerbaijan now expects accountability and justice from its partner. Previously, my colleague Dilek Tuna discussed the current Azerbaijani-Armenian peace process with academic Dr. Haki Ojal. He talked about Turkey's role in the talks, calling it trilateral in nature.
Officially, it's called bilateral talks, but we all know, everybody knows that it is trilateral talks. The Turkish relations with Armenia is also very important. If Azerbaijani and Armenian relations are going to improve, it means that the Turkish-Armenian relations will also prosper and improve. It is the natural for two nations, and Turks and Azerbaijanis call themselves, or the union between them is two states, one nation. So if that state has good relations with Armenia, then this state will also have very good relations with Armenia. And Armenians know that. And they know that any development between Turkey and Armenia is very much dependent on what their relations are going to be with Azerbaijan. And with this in mind, the Turkish Prime Minister is trying to talk to his Azerbaijani counterpart to understand the level of the talks right now between Armenia and Azerbaijan. The better that relationship between Armenia and Azerbaijan, the Turkey will have very good relations with, or better relations with, Armenia.
Kazakhstan's Energy Ministry reported that renewable energy sources accounted for almost 7% of the country's total electricity output in the first half of 2025. Over the 6-month period, renewable energy facilities generated 4.2 million kilowatt hours, with wind power contributing the most, with 2.6 million kilowatt hours. That's more than 60% of the total. By the end of June, Kazakhstan's total installed renewable energy capacity had surpassed 3,000 megawatts. That's all we have for now from Baku. Stay tuned to A News for more updates and enjoy the rest of your weekend.